There are two games left in the 2025 CPL playoffs. The first one of those is next Sunday, November 2nd, 4 o'clock Eastern time at Hamilton Stadium. Forge FC against Cavalry FC. In the history of the CPL, there's only been 1 year where Forge and Cavalry did not meet in the playoffs. That was 2021. It feels like it's these two teams at this time of year every year. Forge obviously dropping from the 1-2 game for a second straight season. Cavalry going the long way, fighting their way into that. And now only one of these sides will be in the CPL final this year. Mitch, seeing this matchup on paper, seeing this one coming up as the, penultimate game of the 2025 season, what's your initial thought and how exciting is it for these two heavyweights to go toe-to-toe in an elimination game?
I mean, it felt inevitable. I mean, for Cavalry, certainly they knew that at some point they're going to have to face Forge in this playoff run if it went to plan. And I think honestly, maybe for them, it's a little bit better that it's not the final that's in Hamilton, that they're going there. But obviously, these have been the class of the league over its history, and that continues again this season. We've talked about how good both of these clubs have been. Maybe a bit of an off year for Cavalry, still trying to prove that they're at that point, and for Forge, now after being knocked off their perch a little bit in this last game by Atletico Ottawa, trying to prove that was an outlier and that they're still the dominant elite force of the Canadian Premier League. So I think that there's a lot of excellent storylines going into this game, and it'll be a unique one considering 90% of the time when we've seen these two clubs face each other, it is with silverware on the line, but this time it's just to reach a final, and Atletico Ottawa is waiting in the nation's capital, so that makes it all the more exciting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Between these teams this year, obviously 2 draws, 1 win for Forge in Hamilton back at the very start of the season, 1 win for Cavalry in Calgary in one of the more shocking moments of the 2025 season, where Forge's, I think, 20-game unbeaten run came to an abrupt halt in Calgary when the Cavs beat them 4-1 in a pretty comprehensive win. We've seen Cavalry put together an excellent plan to play Forge in the playoffs. They did it twice last year. Obviously, Forge had, I guess, in that sense, lost their last 2 playoff games against Cavalry. But I do think, just given form, given the season, AGR, do you think Forge are still slight favorites heading into this one?
It's a good question. I mean, yes, obviously they finished higher up the table. At the same time, like, this is the pretty bad case scenario of, okay, the team you're playing, they're coming off a win. They are the defending North Star Cup champions. Like, it's not an easy matchup. I think you would have hoped for maybe a tired York, right? Or something along those lines. So I'll be fascinated, because I will say I've just been thinking here, like, this has got to be their biggest non-final meeting between these two, right? Because what's very interesting is that if, on Forge's side, every final has always featured the team that has won the regular season. So it's kind of interesting that this could be if Forge loses, that'd be the first year. It's funny that we haven't seen a double yet. Every team that has had the chance for a double, they've fallen on the last hurdle. It's never been you fall earlier in the playoffs. Yeah. On the flip side, Cavalry, they're the defending North Star Cup champions, right? Like, they have that in their pocket. Either way, one of them's going home. Cavalry can, this is Cavalry's last chance to defend the fact that they could play in CONCACAF next year. That's also something that will mean a lot for them. So for Forge, yeah, I think this is about as tough as a game as they could have gotten. I think they're slight favorites, but that's about it, because that Cavalry have played them as close as anyone else in this league ever, and I think that's especially going to continue heading into this game. And you have to remember, the last time that Cavalry played at Forge in an elimination game, they won. So that also gives them a bit of an edge that another team might not have had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a really, really interesting game for me, because usually when it's Forge and Cavalry in the playoffs, it feels like these are the two big dogs for sure, unequivocally. Like, these are two teams operating at the height of their powers. This time, they've both got maybe a bit of a chip on their shoulder, I think, right? Forge coming out of that loss to Ottawa, backs against the wall a little bit more. They need to win this game at home, to avoid their first ever failure to make a CPL final, which is again remarkable. Cavalry, meanwhile, again, bit of a chip on her shoulder, finished third in the season, as we mentioned earlier, well behind Forge and Ottawa, not at full health, as we said. It seems pretty unlikely that they'll get Sergio Camargo back. AGR, will come right back to you, though, here. What could swing this? It feels like a very close game between two teams who know each other very well. If something were to swing it, tactically or performance-wise, what could you see that being?
Yeah, well, a few factors stand out. Cavalry's away form this year. That has been a big worry. They struggle away from home. They had some really disappointing results over the last month, especially like dropping points specific in Vancouver. I was at both of those games, and something looked off about them, especially how they closed out the matches. Of course, Ottawa beat the doors off them, quite frankly, for lack of a better word, in Ottawa. So for Cavalry, they're away form. Of course, can Cavalry score first? Because the Cavalry that has scored first this year versus the Cavalry that has conceded may as well be two different teams. On the flip side, for Forge, can they just get back to what's made them so good at home? Just the control they can bring, the tactical flexibility. Can they get the right attacking balance? Because they did look a bit off in this one with just the way they were able to feed Brian Wright. I mean, ultimately, out of the 5 CPL playoff teams, they're the only team not to get a goal from their number 9. That is something that stands out considering how many goals Brian Wright scored for them this year. So a lot of focus on Cavalry given how good they are, but I think for Forge being at home, they've got a lot to look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny we mentioned Cavalry scoring first. They did score first last time they were in Hamilton. Sergio Camargo, though, in the second minute of that game, and he ended up with a draw. Again, as we mentioned, probably not going to be there on Sunday. But Mitch, I'll come back to you with kind of the same thing for AGR. I just want to get your thoughts on what your gut's telling you about this game and what you think could be the factors that swing it one way or the other.
Sometimes in playoffs, especially, we kind of look for unlikely heroes, but it always seems like when Forge play Cavalry, like it's the same likely heroes that are coming through. Tristan Borges, Kyle Becker has so many goals against Cavalry. You look at Ali Musi, Tobias Warshevsky, what they've done against Forge. Tobias Warshevsky saying after the match, I love playing Forge, and he's shown that over his career, certainly with the playoffs last year, being the guy who scored that goal, obviously at Hamilton Stadium, and then scored and assisted in the final as well. By the way, 5 goal contributions in his 3 playoff games for Cavalry, which is pretty crazy. The clutch performance from him. Even during a bit of a down season this year, but it's always the heroes that seem to come up big for the two sides in this match. So I'll be really watching, especially Borges Becker. They got taken off early in this past game. Maybe Bobby Smirniota sending a bit of a message to those guys in terms of like, we need you at your very best in these games. So very, very interesting to watch those players, and they always tend to have some role to play in these games.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned a slight down year compared to last year for Warshevsky. He still had 2 goals and an assist against Forge in those 4 games this year. So it is funny that he mentioned he likes playing against Forge because boy, does he. He's got, I think, 5 goals in his career against them, including the 2 in the playoffs last year. But anyway, it's Forge and it's Cavalry again in the CPL playoffs. Contender semifinal. One of them will head to Ottawa to play in a CPL final, and one of them will have their season come to an end. This game, again, Sunday, November 2nd at Hamilton Stadium, 4 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Alberta time. If you're watching from there, 1 p.m. on the West Coast. Do not miss this one. It'll be on OneSoccer. It'll be on TSN. And after Sunday evening, we will know who is playing in the 2025 CPL Final. And we'll be back with you next week to recap it all and get you set for, again, another exciting championship match. But until then, enjoy the week and don't forget to watch Forge against Cavalry.